I want to talk about the foundation. What happened? How did that start? Can you give people a bit of a backstory about that as well?
I got into this whole thing because I wanted to transform young lives, right? And I wanted to give children tools to overcome massive transitions like bullying, adolescence, transitioning into different schools, and the challenges that they might face in life. We believe that if you give a child a black belt character as a child, it literally sets them up for a happy and successful life as an adult.
The things that you've learned about scaling a business, you've then put into being able to give back.
You have to understand what you're trying to scale and who you're doing it for and how you can benefit them the most.
For a long time as an entrepreneur, I wanted to be part or to support an organization, but I found it really hard to find one that I knew exactly that where the funds were going, what they were doing, because I wanted to feel maybe in a personal way, more emotionally connected. I didn't just want to do my bit. Hi and welcome to the Kelly Lundberg podcast. I'm your host, and on today's show, we have someone who I met last year and I was so inspired by his conversation. I really wanted to get him on the podcast. Seb Bates is the founder of the Warrior Academy and also the founder of the Bates Foundation. He embraces every aspect of his personal brand, but more than that, everything that he's doing from scaling his businesses to contributing impact to the world. This episode is full of value and you're going to love it. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Kelly Lundberg podcast. Seb, it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me on.
We're in a new venue. We're in the gym of Podstar.
I know.
But somewhere I think that you're quite comfortable in.
I know. I used to be a PT, so yeah, we could do a little workout afterwards. We'll see what happens.
We could do it in high heel shoes.
There we go.
A new look. Before we kind of get into the bits, I have to say I did ChatGPT. Now we've met before, so I knew the backstory. I knew why I wanted to have you on, so I knew about you. But my new thing is not just Googling someone; it's ChatGPTing,
which is kind of worrying, isn't it?
It is.
It used to be what you are, what Google says about you. Now it's what ChatGPT says about you.
So ChatGPT basically said that you're an entrepreneur, an adventurer, personal brand expert, founder of the Warrior Academy and the Bates Foundation.
Cool.
How are you?
Pretty accurate.
Yeah, okay.
Personal brand expert's your job, not mine, but...
But I did like that. But you said that you kind of cover aspects of that.
I wonder
where
they've got that from. Interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts and talks and mentored a lot of people and worked on their personal brands. And I suppose organically worked on mine, but I've never called myself a personal brand expert, but fair enough.
Maybe start with that. When did you realize you had a personal brand?
I realized how important a personal brand was after doing a bunch of mentoring or being mentored and doing a business accelerator with Daniel Priestley, who, he's kind of the grandmaster sensei of personal branding, right?
He really is.
And he took me under his wing and really taught me an awful lot around 2017. Mm-hmm. And so within the first kind of year of working with him, I'd written a book, became a best-selling author, created loads of content, loads of articles, loads of videos, started doing loads of face-to-cam stuff, and started to put all of my focus on personal branding. I think within, I would say, 2 years of that, we had scaled our small countryside business with 3 employees from the UK to Dubai, and I was working directly with the royal family, flying around the world with them. And so that was all because of the focus and emphasis we put on personal branding.
Love that. Well, if anyone's listening and they're still not convinced after 150 episodes we've done about personal branding, there's one in there. Was that when you were PT then? Or what was that?
I can give you my story if you like.
Yeah,
I'll give you the run through. So grew up in Aldershot in the UK, military house in a military neighbourhood. Dad was a para, was a commander, then became a para. My childhood was watching him jump out of planes, climbing tanks, doing assault courses. We moved around quite a lot. Eventually, I joined the Royal Marines Reserves when I was 16, left when I was 18, went to Denmark to become an architect, to study university there. Lasted about a year, realized uni wasn't for me, took a one-way ticket to India, picked up work randomly around India, Southeast Asia. I realized it wasn't sustainable. After about 8 to 10 months of that, flew back to the UK, did a personal training course, wanted to do something physical. Quite a contrast from being an architect for 7 years studying. My first gig as a PT was taking over a rundown inner city gym's Thai boxing class. Mm-hmm. And I saw very, very quickly the impact that we could make to these young men's lives in particular. It was mostly guys who were there. Yeah. we really transformed their lives with the kind of program. And it wasn't about martial arts; it was about character development, and that was a real light bulb moment for me. I thought, what if I could just get them when they're younger and really change the course and direction of their life? So I decided to start the Warrior Academy, which primarily focused on primary age up to secondary age and that transition from primary to secondary school. So yeah, personal training is something I did for a few years when I came back from Thailand, basically.
Yeah. And how did you get, like you've got the age group of primary school to, up to 18, 19 maybe?
Yeah, I'd say our average student is kind of 7 to 9 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but we take from the age 2 and above.
But you're actually then targeting the parents.
Yeah, so parents are our customers, and then obviously we then work with their children. So parents want a desired outcome, right, for their children. It's typically what we call the 3 C's, confidence, conduct, or concentration. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we work with parents to develop those 3 C's in their children, giving them a black belt character.
And I love how you've got a framework in there, because I always think, and one of the things when I'm working with clients is to help them when they're growing their business to find frameworks which make it easier for customers to understand.
It brings us to life, right?
Yeah.
Like if I was to sit with you and just give you 20 minutes to talk about what we do, sometimes it's quite hard to understand and visualize it. But if you were to sit down and say, here are the 3 C's, we develop them, we work on this specific thing, you grow them to a high level, following this 4-step methodology, it becomes very easy to visualize and understand. So, yeah, definitely
I love
understand
that. I call it the UPBS, your unique personal branded system or solution.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that. So you started with the Warrior Academy, and was that in Dubai then? You launched that?
No, so the Warrior Academy started in the countryside in England.
Oh, it did start there, yeah.
In a little village called Road, and there was about 1,000 people who lived in the village, about 100 kids went to this primary school, and about 20 of them signed up to the class. So a large portion of the kids from that village joined, and that was the first ever kind of kids class we did.
Wow. And then what made you come to Dubai then?
So we grew the Warrior Academy to about 500 kids in the UK,
Yeah.
In the countryside, right? So I would often drive 2 hours to get from one village to another one.
Wow.
And I was 3 or 4 hours in the car every day, and I realized that it was very difficult to scale something like that, even though I'd spent, I suppose 7 years trying to grow it. We took it to about 500 students. At the same time, I had almost a career in extreme sports. So I was like a semi-professional base jumping, Muay Thai fighting athlete at the time, which is a whole other story. But yeah, so after about 7 years, I then thought, right, if I'm going to scale this business, I need to take it somewhere urban where there's a high population. And that's what we did. It was going to be London, but then I came to Dubai for 3 days. I saw the opportunity and I thought, we just got to try it. So I gave my wife sort of 2 months to move with a newborn.
I love it. They've gone in literally head first with baby.
Exactly.
And how was that transition? Because I think there's a lot of talk about Dubai where people go, okay, you came for 3 days and gone, we're moving.
Yeah.
How would you explain that to someone who's maybe not been to Dubai or been on a holiday? How easy or how hard was it?
So I look back through my career as an entrepreneur, and I realized that there are specific moments that were ridiculously risky and so dangerous in terms of so much could go wrong. I was in a position where my daughter had just been born. The business had kind of stalled in the UK for almost a year. It wasn't growing, and on this trip, I realized that we needed to take a big leap of faith, right? We didn't have the money to do it. I tried to sell my house, but it was taking ages to sell. So I took on about £100,000 of debt, launched in the UAE. This is beginning of 2018.
Okay.
And so, back then it was way more complicated than it is now. You needed to have a UAE partner. It was, very expensive to do. You didn't have so many examples of other Brits who had done it. It was kind of something that so few people had done in comparison to today, where we're being flooded with loads of expats coming in, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really have many people to compare it to. I had a really good friend here who kind of showed me the way and introduced me to people and helped me out a lot, which definitely helped. And so I was in that position where we had to take a leap of faith. We did a lot of online advertising. I tested the water. I think I contacted about 300 schools in the UAE.
Wow.
Only about 2 wanted to work with us.
And why was that? Because you were new or they didn't get the concept?
I think it was because we were new.
Okay.
And we approached them as, we're just starting out here, and schools were so hard to get into. But I think also I wasn't that keen on working with schools. I felt like when we were running after school clubs, we were compared to other clubs running after school clubs. And so it's typically not a premium situation. You're competing with other clubs that don't charge a premium for their service. You've got huge volumes of kids in the classes, and they don't necessarily have high quality classes, right? And we wanted to really separate ourselves and do something premium. So we weren't really a good fit for schools. And so, yeah, basically we launched over here. Within the first 2 months of launching here, I got contacted by the royal family. And they wanted me to work with them in the palace here, but also in their home in the UK. So I was flying back and forth while my wife was growing and running the academy here. So she stepped up and took over everything pretty much. We had a team of 3. We started to really grow quite quickly. We grew to about 250 students in the UAE with a team of 3, and then COVID hit and we lost absolutely everything.
And then what did you do then?
So COVID hit, and I was actually with Dr. Di Martini in Africa, in South Africa, doing a course with him, which really was to help me develop our anti-bullying program. We've got a really controversial anti-bullying program. It's controversial, but it works, right? And it's a lot of the work that I've done with him that's contributed towards that. But the 4th day, do you know Dr. Di Martini?
Not well enough to know.
Like an incredible guy. Right?
Yeah.
He's so knowledgeable, and the way he delivers, he'll stand there in the middle of the room and just for 8 hours just talk nonstop and deliver amazing content. But your mind is blown, right? And so you do sort of 8 to 12 hour days in there, 3 days back to back, and then you're writing all your notes afterwards. So you're 16 hours of tough work. And I remember on day 3 of that, mentally exhausted, my wife phoned me up and said, the health department have come in and shut everything down. COVID, that thing that we thought was just in China, has now hit Dubai. We can't train any of our kids. We've got to pivot online really, really quickly. And so, what we tried to do is find locations, hire new halls that would let us in. Schools wouldn't let us in. And I was kind of managing that while in Africa. I took the last flight out of South Africa before they stopped all flights.
Yeah.
Got back home, and then we had to quickly pivot online. Interesting point here. There wasn't an awful lot you could do as a martial arts academy, right? So I created a new business leveraging my personal brand through all the entrepreneurs I knew, which was a social media organization, and we made 6 figures within 1 month of launching.
No way.
It was an incredible experience, and that really is the power of personal brand, right? I had leveraged and developed my personal brand through my business and through the network and opportunities I had growing the business. In that process, I could take that in a disaster and quickly create another source of income, which is what I did. And I think by doing that, we kept the Warrior Academy alive. Because I didn't need to use any revenue from the Warrior Academy. I could keep the staff, didn't have to fire anyone, looked after everyone, looked after the students, poured back into it, looked after everyone we could within the community, and then had this other business going on. And so towards the end of COVID, or the lockdowns at least, no martial arts club existed or survived here. There was nothing. And so what we realized was we didn't really want to work in schools anymore. We didn't want to hire halls anymore. What if we could be the first martial arts club to open after COVID? That was our goal. And so we went into commercial real estate, like everyone was running out of this like it was a burning building. We went in and we took this one office. It was office M16 in Al Jude building above Tom and Serge Cafe. Okay. And you weren't allowed to open because it was COVID, right? And I knew that the refurb would take us a month.
Yeah.
So what we said to parents was, if you want to sign up as a founding member of this, pay for an annual with us, that would cover the cost of us launching, and then we'll be able to launch. So we had the money from the parents to actually do the refurb. And just as the COVID rules relaxed and we were allowing students in, the refurb finished. And so we were the first martial arts club to open. And so we grew very, very quickly. Within 2 years, we went from 200 students to over 1,000.
Wow.
2 years after that, we reached over 2,000 members and became the largest martial arts academy in the Middle East.
Congratulations. And to go from nothing effectively coming here and all shut down to growing in that way, there's vision, there's foresight in that, and something that I think is maybe consistent in your personal brand is risk taking.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people during that COVID would go, well, I'm not investing into something like real estate in that space at that time. So I love that. So scaling is one of the things that you clearly do very well.
Yeah.
What are some of the strategies that you put into place? So we briefly talked about ads before we started this. Is it just word of mouth? Do you invest in advertising? If so, where? Maybe talk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So really the question is around scaling and my approach to scaling. The first thing I would say is the whole process of entrepreneurship is a bit like self-development. I see it like extreme self-development. So to look at this from a very broad perspective, one of the greatest skills you can learn through self-development or through entrepreneurship is learning to let go. Within your own life, you can't control what other people think about you. You can't control the outcome of certain things. You can't, there are so many things you can't control. You have to learn to let go. And business is exactly the same. And so for me, my to-do list is always a to-delegate list, right? Every single thing that I do, and as you grow and you grow and you grow, it becomes even more important. You have to learn to let go. And one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to scale is they don't let go early on enough, right? You have to kind of realize that people are, when you onboard people, new staff, they're going to do things slightly differently to you. They might do it better than you, and you can learn from them. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly been my experience, especially in the last year. But I would say you've got to take that risk to learn to let go.
Yeah.
Once you realize it, then the whole thing starts snowballing, and it's way easier. So learning to let go is a fundamental aspect of the growth and the scalability of a business, but also your approach to risk taking. You can't scale a business unless you take risk. It's as simple as that. And I think people really overestimate, I think it's a human condition to really overestimate the impact of a risk on your own life. We're way more resilient and resourceful than we realize, right? And I look back at the last 15 years in business, and so many things have happened. I had an accident when I was 24, 4 years into growing the business, which almost left me completely disabled. It was in a wingsuit base jump in Switzerland. I broke every bone from my waist down. I was told I could never walk again.
Wow.
It took me 2 years to learn to walk, and I saved my business teaching on crutches for 2 years, pretty much. And that was one thing. I managed to regrow the business from that. The next thing would have been having a child when I wasn't ready at all, right? And what can I do with that? My wife was one of our main instructors. We had to shut down loads of clubs and then rebuild again. The next thing would have been moving to Dubai and all the uncertainty with that, and then COVID and all the uncertainty with that. Then we've had legal issues and toxic staff members we had to remove, and you name it. We've had every single issue, from health, from economic, from financial, from government, from cultural. There's so many different things we've had issues with. And if you were to zoom in to any single year or every, single episode of that, every 2 or 3 years we get a disaster, right? You would think there is so much uncertainty, what's the point? Yeah. But if you zoom out, you see incredible growth and scalability of a business. And so the first thing I would say is, you've got that learning to let go. It's understanding that when you zoom out, we're far more resilient and resourceful and able to deal with disasters than we think. Yeah. And you become the person who can have a big business. You don't just plan a big business. You have to evolve into that human being, right? If you gave me the business I've got today 3 years ago, I'd have a heart attack, right? It would be way too stressful. The problems that I've got to deal with, you'd be stressed about the smallest thing 5 to 10 years ago in your business, or even a year ago, right? Yeah. And so one of the really great ways to understand how much you've grown is, what's your reaction to the size of the problems? And when I look at the problems I have to deal with now, they're 10 times bigger, but I'm 10 times better at dealing with them. Yeah. And that's that growth as an entrepreneur, right? So it's understanding that you can do it. If you zoom out, you understand that you grow into the person who can cope with things. Learning to let go and then taking risks. When you've got that perspective, you don't mind taking risks as much, right? And so I think neurologically, some people are way more capable and programmed to take risks than others. And I think I'm certainly that profile.
I think that what you've just mentioned about the ability to be able to handle bigger things. Now, my husband and I have had this discussion many times about parents, and I see some of the things that stress my parents out that would never have stressed them out 10 years ago. And it's just that magnitude of a problem. I think when you've maybe stepped out and you're not dealing with all these things anymore, you think it's really big, versus when you're in it, you're like, no, I can deal with this. And what else? Throw it on me. I can deal with it. So what are some of the habits or the non-negotiables for you in a day to be able to scale and take on these sort of bigger challenges?
Really important to understand how you like to work. The older I get, the less social I find myself being. I don't really have time to meet anyone. It's quite funny. People want to meet me all the time, and I get so many amazing opportunities to meet people who I probably would like to meet, but I find with kids as well, I really protect my time a lot. And even a coffee, meeting up for a coffee, unless there's some outcome to the coffee, I don't really feel the need to do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Maybe I'm just going more and more
If
introvert.
it's
I don't
not
know.
a hell yeah, it's a no. Is that not what it is?
Exactly. So I think more and more in my life, I'm trying to simplify my life, and less is more.
Yeah.
And I'm just removing things. I just find like I'm removing things all the time. I've stopped mentoring. I mentored 600 business owners over the last few years. I've entirely stopped doing that so I can just focus on my own thing.
Yeah.
There are all these different products and services that my mind wants to get distracted by and create. And I know that I'm doing just two things, which is growing the Warrior Academy and growing the charity. And unless something is really driving towards that, I don't need to do it. And so I think it's understanding what it is you really need to focus on, and then being cutthroat. That is all you do, right? Then there's the lifestyle habits, which for me is a long walk every morning. I literally live the same Groundhog Day life every single day, and I love it.
Yeah.
I walk around the building sites of Jebel Ali every day for about 2 hours before the sun rises. I do my kind of notes and my work during that time, listen to some podcasts maybe. I have the same coffee at 6:30 in the morning at the same petrol station, meet the same people, go home, walk for another hour. I've created this, we've got this outhouse, maid's room if you like, in our garden. And I've turned that into an office. And I've said to myself, I'm not leaving there until we've reached a certain target with the Warrior Academy, right? And so I've got this beautiful office for everyone who works for us. And I'm in this kind of hobbit hole with this big aircon blowing on me. And it's got no chair. It's just got a walking pad. And I think, for a lot of people that might sound strange, but it's just like, that is my process of just constantly moving my body, constantly focusing on one thing, and having that system in place. Even the food I eat every day is the same. And I think that, when you have that consistency in your life with everything, I think it becomes so much easier to get somewhere. The same with training, right?
Yeah.
Like, training isn't just a big one-off event. It's just this monotonous consistency of eating the same thing, doing the same exercise, doing the same lifts, and just gradually improving it all the time. It's not necessarily trying to make everything exciting and different all the time. That actually slows you down. So it's having the kind of discipline over motivation to just do the same thing all the time over a sustained period of time, 2 to 3 years.
Discipline over motivation. I like that. I was listening to a video that Matt Gray put out, because do you know him? He talks a lot about simplicity. You've got to simplify, and his systems.
Yeah.
He's also moved here.
Oh, cool.
And this morning, it was exactly the same. He said, people think to scale a business, you need to be working, X amount of hours. And he said, you don't. You need to just take out the things that are distracting you, get great systems, and work on those systems in order to simplify what you're doing and how you're offering it. And you've just echoed exactly that. So I'm going home to look at my systems.
I think entrepreneurs get bored, don't they?
Yeah.
Because the thing that our brain is great at doing is creating something and bringing it to life, having the energy and passion to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like another part of the brain that says, okay, you've created that thing, now you've got to spend 20 years doing it.
Yeah. And you're like,
If you want to make your business successful, it's basically a 20-year game doing the same thing for 20 years.
Yeah.
And we tend to go into it thinking it's always going to be exciting. And then you reach a problem with it, a bit of a glass ceiling, and you're like, this is not going to work. Let me find something else that's better. But then you'll have reached the same glass ceiling in a different business you might create, right? And I've created several kind of 6-7 figure businesses, and they've all reached their own kind of plateaus.
Interesting.
Until you start saying to yourself, well, if I just sit with the same problem for long enough, I break through it, and the business will double. And I can see this in the growth of our business, right? Where we grow, we plateau for a bit, for different reasons. It could be a geographical. What was the first one, right? Geographical issue.
Yeah.
We plateaued, bang, changed it. Then we grew, and it was a cultural issue within the business, right? We got rid of the wrong people, hired the right people, bang, broke through it. The next thing, it was a marketing issue. We resolved that, bang, we got through it. So every single time we reach that plateau, it's almost like we double in size within 18 months, or even within a year, once we break the plateau. But you have to spend a year bored sitting with a problem without going and creating a new business.
That's excellent advice. One that I'm taking on. I want to talk about the foundation. What happened? How did that start? Can you give people a bit of a backstory about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So I got into this whole thing because I wanted to transform young lives, right? And I wanted to give children tools to overcome massive transitions like bullying, adolescence, transitioning into different schools, and the challenges that they might face in life. We believe that if you give a child a black belt character as a child, it literally sets them up for a happy and successful life as an adult. And so in the UK, for about 10 years, we've been giving about 10% of our students scholarships, and we never advertised it. Scholarship was basically a free tuition, free pass to all of our classes. And I would give my team in the UK, free choice, whoever they wanted to give that to. So whenever sales calls came in, they would interview all the parents.
Okay.
And they would, find out what their challenges are, what they're struggling with. Parents who are going through separation, parents who have a child who's terminally ill, a child who's going through bullying, financial hardship, whatever it is. If they really felt like they couldn't afford the training but they really needed it, they would give them free tuition. And so this concept...
How would you qualify for that? Or was it different from every person?
It's really, because we didn't advertise it, no one ever asked for it. And I think if we said, we give 10% scholarships to everyone, we'd get inundated with people saying,
Got you.
I'm going through this, can I have a free? And so that's the issue. So we got a lot of referrals. So we partner with children's hospices. Mm-hmm. So we would sponsor the siblings of kids who were terminally ill. Because if you imagine you've got two kids, one of them is terminally ill, they're not going to make it within a year. All of your energy and focus as a parent goes to them.
Of course.
And the sibling often gets left out a little bit. They still go through bullying, change of school, adolescence, and so on. But they also don't get the attention that they normally would. Mm-hmm. And then they have to deal with the loss and the impact of that on the whole family. So we mentor those children through that whole transition. Yeah. We got referrals from welfare officers, from the military when parents were going away for 6 months, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that concept really lit a fire in the hearts of our team. They weren't just turning up to get paid. There was a huge cultural shift for us. Yeah. And we really wanted to scale that. When I got to Dubai, we realized, okay, we don't have as many potential students we can help here. A lot of the families they come from fairly affluent families, a lot of disposable income, which was very different to the families we were looking after in the UK. Yeah. And so I said, what if we could scale this local impact we were making globally? Yep. And so I took a trip to Nairobi, and I was near a slum called Kibera Slums. There's a place called Tika, and I was in a homeless shelter there where there were 30 boys, and these boys were mostly taken from railway lines where they had left their home to look for food or got into gangs or whatever it was. And they'd basically run away from home. Some of them, they didn't run away from home. They were trying to support their families, bring food back, but they got on a train to find food and then got lost because the train went away and they don't know how to get home. So there was this huge issue with homelessness, especially for boys. And so I was in this room on a wooden chair with 30 boys. And when you look at these boys, they're smaller than average because they got malnutrition, all this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. They're covered in burns and scratches because they've had such tough lives living on the street for months. Yeah. Part of gangs, all sorts. And my thought was this was meant to be the first martial arts club in a developing country as part of our scholarship academy for our new charity called the Bates Foundation. And I was just filled with imposter syndrome. I just thought how the systemic issues they face are so huge. How can I possibly make a dent in this? It's just impossible, right? But I carried on the class anyway. And one of the boys called Jeremy, I gave him his first ever uniform. He led the class, was really confident. I gave him a Warrior Academy uniform, and his face completely lit up. And that was the first time I saw him smile. And the thing about when you give a child a martial arts uniform, it's not just giving them clothes. This might be the only pair of clothes they actually own that weren't given to them, right? And so it's not just about giving them clothes. Kids have amazing imaginations. When he puts on this uniform, he's a martial artist, right? So what do kids do when they wear a superhero outfit? They want to become like that. So you put the uniform on, and they want to become like a martial artist. Okay, well, what is a black belt instructor like? High levels of confidence, high levels of conduct, high levels of concentration, right? They've got a black belt character. That's aspirational. So you're giving them a different perception of their own lives and what they can become. Yeah. And so after 12, 15 years of working with young children developing their character, what I realized was we needed to give these kids a hand up, not a hand out. And if we're ever going to change the situation they're in, because a lot of the time, a homeless kid in the slums of Nairobi does get an opportunity. They get an opportunity of education, but they're often pulled back into child labor, pulled back into gangs, or they avoid authority because they're so terrified of authority from previous experiences. Yeah. But they do get a shot, and the only thing that stops them from succeeding in that schooling, in the educational system, is their own perception of themselves within it, right? And their own perception of their lives. And so I realized that if there's anything that can change his behavior, it's his character.
Yeah.
That's what we've done with thousands of kids. So if we want to transform Jeremy's life, what we need to do is develop his character. And so I call that little homeless shelter, which was a converted pigsty. I call it the point of no return for us, because after those 30 boys and the impact we made with them, we transitioned them into full-time education. We made martial arts clubs in the schools they went to, right? So they would train in the homeless shelter, and then they would go to the schools and become instructors, assistant instructors in those schools. We would hire local martial arts black belts, who were aspirational role models, local role models for these kids, former police officers, all this sort of stuff. And it was incredible, the transformations we were making. And so now, we've scaled that to working in about 10 different countries, 5 continents. I think we're the largest martial arts academy in Kenya with over 3,000 students, all vulnerable kids. We've got a food program going out next week where every week we give, 500 meals out to kids in the slums. We're in some of the largest slums on the planet. And every single week there's 4,000 kids going through the program. And so that's the journey of the Bates Foundation from where we started with 10% of the UK to where we are now.
And the scale of that, the things that you've learned about scaling a business, you've then put into scaling into being able to give back.
Yeah.
Who else has helped you with that? Because I'm thinking, oh my God, that sounds so much. Like, how can people do that where they have that purpose? Like you said, if you felt that fire and your team feel that fire, how can other people that've got businesses go, I want to help create that fire and give back?
I think the first thing starts with the question, right? And the question is maybe not something you could easily answer, but it's the way I think about it is this: what if the whole point of entrepreneurship wasn't to grow your business and increase revenue?
Yeah.
What if it was to explore your potential to impact the world and to explore how much fulfillment you can get? And so for me, it was a case of, well, if I really wanted to make this business really fulfilling, we wouldn't just work with paying members, but we'd create this system where we transform kids' lives who would never get access to this all over the world. If I can have, for every paying member, 2 kids on a scholarship like Jeremy, I know that my kids are looking at me as an entrepreneur, but also as a philanthropist.
Yeah.
They're growing up knowing that. It brings me so much fulfillment to know we're actually making a massive impact, but so too will our team feel that.
Yeah.
And so what if we don't just scale, profit and revenue, but we scale fulfillment? And so as your business grows, if you can just plant these seeds of knowing how you're going to make an impact and then scale that, not as revenue or fulfillment, but simultaneously. Because if you go too much on the fulfillment, you won't make any money. You don't feel financially empowered. You'll end up stopping so you can go and make money because you need to live. But if you can do both at the same time and you just make it normal as an entrepreneur to do that, I think that's a really powerful way to live. And in terms of how to scale that, the beautiful thing about philanthropy and growing a business is it's basically identical to growing a business, right? They are the same skill set you need as an entrepreneur to grow a business as you do a charity. And so what I found is, you basically create this product, you raise money, sales or fundraising, and then you take that out to the market and you see how many people you can help with that product. The funny thing is, with business, you need to do some work and, find out if the product is actually useful, right? And so, are people going to benefit from this? And so what I say is you ask, you don't guess. Initially you guess, then you figure it out, and then you ask, right? Same thing with charity. And so what we're finding is, we have this great idea. We'll interview 10 orphanages. We'll find out where we can work, and we'll choose one. And then we get into that community. We figure out what else we can do to help. And we develop a food program which feeds thousands of kids, right? And so I think that innovation carries on in terms of you have to understand what you're trying to scale and who you're doing it for and how you can benefit them the most. So that really makes an impact. Carrying over the same skills. Who helped me on this journey is a good question as well. So I would say a huge aspect of this was helped by mentors I've had, like Daniel Priestley, who's become a lifelong friend as well, and advised me throughout the last 7-8 years, but also with the charity a lot. And he's become a patron of the charity. And I got to a point with the charity where I was spending about $200,000 a year on my own money, I'm just growing it regardless. I wanted to use the money from the Warrior Academy, but we needed the Warrior Academy to use that money to grow. And so I was just like, well, I'm just going to use my savings. I'm just going to spend all my money on the charity. And I remember sitting with Dad, and he was like, no, this is not the way to do it, because you're going to slow down the growth of the charity.
Yeah.
You're not going to feel financially empowered yourself. You're going to,
And all the responsibility lies with you then.
Exactly. Then if something happens to me, everything stops, right?
Yeah.
So he was like, you need to fundraise. And I said to him, look, what I don't want to do is to spend loads of money on fundraising.
Yeah.
Like so many charities do, right? So they spend a fortune on marketing or ads or events or whatever. What if I could create a source of funds for the charity, fundraising, without spending any money? So every single pound we raised went directly to the kids.
Yeah.
And we cracked it. And we've raised over $600,000 in the last year doing this.
And so how did you do that?
Tune in for the next episode.
I love it. I'm like on it.
How do we do it? So the way we did it is I reached out to my network. So using my personal brand,
Love it.
reached out to my network and said, I stood up on a ski trip and said, I'm doing this. Created a brochure. Within a week, had a brochure full of spelling mistakes. Stood up and shared it with everyone. It was full of passion. Prolific, not perfect. And I said, this is what I'm doing in the world.
Yeah.
This is what I've done over the last year. This is how much it's costing me to cover the cost of this and to grow from 1,000 vulnerable kids to 10,000 within 3 years, which is our goal. I need 35 entrepreneurs to join me. And we had, from an auction, we raised about $30,000 that day. And following that, we had about 25 entrepreneurs sign up for a 3-year journey. And so that 3-year journey basically is where I take them around the world to all of these slums, and they see the impact they're making while also being a part of a really powerful entrepreneurial network of 6, 7, 8-figure businesses, right? We meet up once a year in Dubai. We call it Desert Dawn. Incredible experience, 24 hours, all these entrepreneurs, hot air balloons, seeing the impact of what we're doing locally, and then a charity update. And then we take them to, an adventure to one of these countries. So we're going to Africa. We're going to Kenya in about 7 weeks. We'll spend a week there. We will go to 5 or 6 different orphanages, slums, homeless shelters, starting with a point of no return, homeless shelter in Tika, and then finish off with an incredible experience where we bond them all with a safari and all this sort of stuff. So it's that fusion of impact and adventure, which doesn't cost us anything to do.
Which is your personal brand.
Exactly,
You're saying it.
yeah.
I'm like, that is just your brand.
Yeah, fusion of impact and adventure. Yeah, exactly. And so, the 3-year journey, there's a set donation every year. People sign up for the 3 years. They can spend £2,000 or £2,500 as a bronze member, or 7.5 as silver. Gold's about 12.5, and then you've got our platinum, where there's only one space, which is 25.
Yeah.
And so each level has a different level of impact. So you can see, for £25 a year, you sponsor one child. So you can imagine it's like 200 kids or 1,000 kids or whatever. And then what we do is we have videos and photos every single month showing what's been going on, a newsletter update. Yeah. We're making a documentary, which we're hoping to pitch to Netflix over the 3 years.
Yeah. And
then what we do is, we take entrepreneurs to see their impact in person. So one of the issues with charities is you ever donated to a charity and not really know where it's gone. It feels like a good thing and you feel like you should be doing it. You might donate to a big charity and then not realize that 30 or 40% goes to actually trying to get you to donate. And so I was like, well, it's something really nice that you've got this transparency where the donations come to us and they go straight to the kids. Yeah. Every single pound doesn't go to logistics or marketing or whatever. It goes directly to them. And so that's what I wanted to create. And so we've got about 10, 15 spaces left. Yeah. And that's basically what I do now.
Love it. I work a lot with Sarah Brooke from the Sparkle Foundation.
Yeah, mine, sorry, yeah.
And I know, so we actually donated our wedding registry. Instead of gifts, we just asked everyone to contribute in that way. So it was something different. For a long time as an entrepreneur, I wanted to be part or to support an organisation. But I found it really hard to find one that I knew exactly where the funds were going, what they were doing, because I wanted to feel, maybe in a personal way, more emotionally connected. I didn't just want to do my bit. Yeah. For me, it had to feel more and do more. So when I met Sarah, I said, how can I help? What can I do? And that's developed a relationship, been to Malawi. But then there's been the personal piece of then why, for the wedding, for example, was, no, we want to give back. But it felt so right and so connected to be able to do that, and knowing where the funds go make the difference.
I think that's a really beautiful thing about running a charity is actually, for me, has been sharing that with a group of entrepreneurs. They haven't necessarily got the time to start a charity, but they want to give, but they want to feel like their money's going somewhere they're connected to, right? And so I've treated this like a startup, and it's almost like I've got eyes and ears watching this startup all the time. I'm in a WhatsApp group with this with all of our patrons, and I give them the raw insights into what it's actually like.
Yeah.
And we've got about 30 or 40 staff in the Bates Foundation now around the world.
Wow.
That takes some organization, right? And it's not always perfect. And we're dealing with logistics in Africa and Asia and India, and we're in Fiji. We've got clubs in the favelas of Rio. We're everywhere. And so sometimes it's quite funny. Sometimes it's quite challenging. And always it's really inspiring. And so these messages are, I'll literally be in a slum in Malawi in India, not Malawi in India, sorry, a slum in Malvani slums in India, and I'll send a voice as I'm walking through the slum saying, I've just come from here, this is what I'm doing. And so people have a very raw insight into this startup charity from where we started when they first joined to where we'll be over those 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's really great when you take people on the journey. They feel a part of the story as well.
Yeah. I love that part of it. That is the journey piece. And
Yeah.
so how much time are you spending percentage-wise on the charity and with the Warriors Academy? I mean, have you switched it now? And
I go through sprints where I do more of one than more of the other.
so it's not an all or nothing.
Yeah, so we're launching a brand new academy in Jumeirah Islands. That's taken up some more time. Nikhil have asked us to open up there, so we're doing a big refurb there. It'll probably be one of our biggest academies here. Very, very popular. We've had over 1,000 people apply for it already.
Wow.
So that's taken a lot of time.
Yep.
And then we've got the trip in Kenya coming up, which is going to be amazing. We're taking about 15 entrepreneurs there. That's taken a lot because we've got demonstrations from about 3,000 kids going on all over the country. Lots of logistics. So different phases and sprints. And so, I spoke about how we love to get distracted, but I've only got these two things, right? So I can get my creative fix by diving into one, outsourcing everything I know we need to do there, diving into the other, delegating everything there, and then kind of bouncing between the two. So I've got that fusion of, the Bates Foundation and the business.
Yeah, the outsourcing part, a huge part. But there is one other distraction you have, and that is 3 children.
Yeah, 3 distractions.
I think what I love when I look at your content that you share, you bring the kids into it. You also don't spend the whole time in one destination. The kids travel with you.
Yeah.
Is that also from your childhood? Because you went to different...
Good question. I guess when we look back, we can,
join the dots.
Yeah, join the dots. We didn't travel a lot as kids.
Okay.
Both my parents, government jobs, NHS, army, 4 kids. It was very expensive to travel.
Right.
We used to go to Denmark every other year. Now and again, do a bit of road trips through Europe. But most summers were kind of in the UK. But we did move house quite a lot. Adventure was a huge part of my childhood. It was we were really encouraged to leave our comfort zone, to grow, big cycle treks, all this sort of stuff. And so for me, I started traveling very young. I guess I was 16, 17, traveling internationally. Became an expat when I was 18 in Denmark, and then basically been in and out of being an expat since then. Traveling has been a huge part of my life, and I think that I've learned so much about the world and myself by traveling that I wanted my kids to feel the same thing.
Yeah.
We live in Dubai. Dubai is fantastic for so many things.
Yeah.
For other things, there are other countries that are better at it, and I think are better for us. I think that the heat here is very challenging. We try and escape that. I think air pollution is another challenge they've got. If you look at the two, they tend to tally up. So between sort of June and September, biggest heat, biggest air pollution. So we try and get away for 3 months or 2 to 3 months at a time there. Typically spend the summers, if we can, in Italy. I'm trying to learn Italian so we can just spend more and more time there. We always spend a month of the year in Thailand, on a small island on the west coast of Thailand. It's got about 3,500 people living there. It's a place called Koh Yanoi. It's majority Muslim, so it hasn't got that party vibe a lot of Thailand's got. We know all the locals. We go to the same villa every year. I wake up in the morning, go for my long sort of sunrise walk, stick the kids in the back of a motorbike, go and do a 1-hour jungle trek on a motorbike, come back, train. We built a home gym there. So we just get that nature vibe and then go on an adventure on a boat, go fishing with the kids, catch the fish, cook the fish, just a complete reset from Dubai life. And I think that they learn so much about nature and food and language by doing that. And we take them out of school to do it. And people say, is it good to take your kids out of school? Well, I think, if I take them out of school 1 or 2 weeks a year, obviously I get fines in the UK if I did this. And
is there not fines in Dubai?
Well, I haven't been fined yet. No. If they did, I'd seriously look at homeschooling.
Yeah.
And I think the only challenge that a lot of people have with homeschooling is the socialization aspect. I think my son in particular would would really benefit from homeschooling. I think sitting down for a long day studying is tough. We see that transition when he comes home. But yeah, for me, it's the traveling aspect is so fundamental to us as a family unit. And it's the ski trips, it's the adventures, it's the jungle treks, it's all the stuff we do, which I think they say something like most of kids' memories from the age of 7 and above is of their childhood, is of their the holidays they go on, right? The adventures they go on.
That's a very good way of putting that, because I think if I look back at my childhood, it's one of the things that my mum was very passionate about, would make sure that we had a family holiday every year, and would stretch it in the sense of would always take us to somewhere different.
Yeah. And how many do you have, right? So I was sitting there in Thailand in this villa and I was like, this has been the most amazing trip ever. And I spent so much time with my kids, 12 hours every day with my kids, doing stuff, doing activities, all this sort of stuff. And when they're busy, they get on, right? It's when they're not busy, they don't get on. And so, my daughter's almost 8 and I'm like, well, when she's sort of 17, 18, it would be harder to take her out of school because of all the exams. She's only primary school now.
Yeah.
B, will she want to come, or will she want to stay at in Dubai and hang out with her friends? So if we do this every year, I've probably only got about 10 of these trips left, right? And so, the thing
until
there
they
is,
get older and then they want to go away with you. And we've started the other way around, going away with my family now as a 40-year-old adult.
Do you know what I think? I think that's the beauty of a ski trip, right? Because how many teenagers, young adults would turn down a ski trip?
Yeah, agreed.
Because they're not going to do it themselves. It's too expensive, right?
Agreed.
So if you say, look, we're going skiing and I'll get I'll pay for the ski pass.
Yeah.
They're probably more likely to come.
Absolutely.
But a hot holiday at a time where it's kind of inconvenient for them, they probably wouldn't. So, that's the other tactic I've got. Get them really good at skiing.
And then know that they'll always come away once a year with mum and dad.
They probably want to come.
I love it. If someone was to Google you and, have a quick look about who you are, what would you like them to feel or think when they see your personal brand and what you're doing?
The fusion of impact and adventure, I think, is pretty consistent throughout my kind of online presence, I say. I would like to think that I'm authentically documenting what it's like to parent 3 kids while building a business, while building a charity. It's not always pretty, and I hope I don't ever put that across, because there are so many ups and downs with it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I've figured it out completely, right?
Do you ever?
Yeah, sometimes I do.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I sit there and be like, I've done that right.
I nailed today.
Yeah, like the story of my daughter.
Yeah, with the
we were
bicycle.
talking about this before, and I was like, I've raised all my kids differently because I've evolved as a parent. So she got the Mark 1 level of me. My son got the Mark 2, and my next daughter, I get the Mark 3.
Which one was the best?
Well, I don't know. This is the other thing, right? I think I should get better at parenting, but also the kids are different, so the dynamic's different. But when I first had my daughter, I was like, right, I'm a dad, and I've got to empower her, because the life's so difficult out there. I've got to empower her to be resilient, to be tough, to get out there and get what she wants out of life, and to have courage and all this sort of stuff. And I can really see that with the way that she's evolved. My son was different. Like, I've been way more nurturing with him, all this sort of stuff, and I can see that now. But with my daughter, like the story of her trying to ride a bike, and for ages she was on stabilizers. She didn't want me to take them off. She was very adamant. No, I'll never take them off. She went to the park, got bullied at the park for having stabilizers, came back, and she was like, right, Dad, I need you to take them off straight away. I was like, finally, great. I was like, I'll go out there and help you do it, help you learn. She's like, no, I would teach myself. So I was looking out the window, and for 30 minutes she was, pushing off, falling over, because she doesn't know how to stabilize, right? And so pushing off, falling over, and eventually she started getting a little bit further. And I came out, gave her some ideas, why don't we take the pedals off so you can use your feet, because with pedals on it's difficult. No, I don't need to do that. And eventually she cracked it, right? And she learned to ride a bike. And she came back into the house and she was like, I've done it, and I didn't need any help. And I was like, I know, you did a really, really good job. And I was kind of there in the background for moral support. And she was like, oh, but by the way, all the tips and advice you gave me, they really, really helped. So I was like,
so you sort of did help me.
Like I was there, but that for me is a really symbolic way of understanding as a parent. At some point, you go from caregiver to mentor, right? And depending on your child's level of empowerment, and there are different aspects of their life where they need to feel empowerment, right? I was becoming more of a mentor there than I was a caregiver. And I think as they get older, that's what you do. I think that the other thing that's very consistent with my online presence and my brand is this theme of courage. So if you ask me what the most important trait or value you can pass on to your kids is, beyond anything else, you could say confidence or kindness or humility or work ethic, whatever it is. For me, it's none of those things.
Yeah.
It's courage. If you develop a child's courage, they're more likely to put themselves in situations where they take risks, which builds their confidence. If you develop a child's courage, they're more likely to stand up for themselves and other people, to do what's right, have a moral compass. Courage is the most important thing. But the biggest problem and mistake we make in society today is we strip kids of that opportunity to have courage because we bubble wrap them. We prevent them from taking risks. We've got this over-nurturing environment for kids rather than really pushing them to leave their comfort zones and grow. And so I think that is where we need to focus. And I hope that is something that's consistent with my online messaging.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we could have another hour. I'm very grateful that you said yes to having this sit down, sharing the value. And thank you so much, Seb. I really wish you all the success with
Thank you so
Warrior
much.
and with the Seb Foundation as well.